They didn't think we'd make it this far, but it's week 13. It's NFL football, so you should give yourself a little pat on the back because we're still here. We're still living. We're going to have some fun today. George, Sam, Eric live in Cincinnati, Ohio. Ian is with us in Columbus. We're going to hit every single game that is going to be played this Sunday, which is most of them. We have a few on Monday and Tuesday now, but not complaining. Betting and fantasy angle. We're going to start where I start every single week, which is looking at what the Falcons line is and deciding how much pain, how much am I going to have to take on this week? Will I be crying under the covers at like 4:05 p.m. when the Falcons miserably can't cover a spread? So they are at home. They're playing the Saints. It's Taysom Hill's third start. First start against the Falcons. Looked really good. Impressive. Graded very well. Second start against a JV squad in Denver was not so good. So the question is this: does Taysom Hill, has he done enough to deserve being a road favorite?
I don't think so. I mean, Taysom Hill is the story in this game. He actually looked pretty good that first game against the Atlanta defense. And the big caveat was, yeah, but it's the Atlanta defense. And then for all the problems Denver had at quarterback, they do at least have a viable defense. And Taysom Hill's adjusted completion rate against Denver was 56%. That is wretched. So this is the question, right? Can he actually be a viable quarterback against a team that can't really cover, even if he can, throw the ball deep?
Well, I think you highlighted the big difference there, which is the Denver Broncos can cover. Bryce Callahan's been one of the best players in the NFL this year. I mean, I know he got hurt in that game, but he played the majority of the game. Justin Simmons is playing every bit as deserving of the franchise tag as any player in the league. The Falcons categorically do not have this on the back end. And what we saw in the game 2 weeks ago was Michael Thomas wide open with tons of separation. Separation where the three of us could make those throws and throw the ball in the ocean here. And that's why, even though I think that this number is probably right, I probably would even lean New Orleans, the bet of the day is Taysom Hill over 1.5 touchdowns, right, in this game. And the reason, you're getting a price of like plus 200. And the reason, of course, is that in his career, he has not thrown one touchdown pass, let alone two. The Falcons, the ultimate slump buster, will come through today.
The prop king is here, and one of my go-to court jesters, the doctor, Eric Eager. Taysom Hill over 1.5 passing touchdowns. I mean, I don't know how you could not love this. This is absolutely beautiful. You're getting you saw this morning at plus 200. Bet $100, win 200 for Taysom Hill. You're not betting on Taysom Hill here, and this is my key point today. And there it says -3. The line is now 2.5. You're betting on Sean Payton. Sean Payton is one of the 3 best offensive coaches in the NFL. He is a genius. He is not coming into this game without a couple of things that the Falcons have never seen before. And so as a short road favorite, the Saints are a decidedly better team. I know Marcus Davenport is inactive. I know Janoris Jenkins is inactive, but they have the most important thing, which is a much better coaching staff in Sean Payton.
Well, and you bring up a great point. This is a bet where, and I like the over in this game more than I like -3, but -3 is a good play in the sense that Taysom Hill's Saints are not going to be a team that's going to let somebody back into the game the way that they're going to play. Like, if this thing gets, 24-3, much like we saw the other day, it's not like they're just going to bleed the clock out and you're going to be able to preserve a lead a lot better, than if you were more of a wide open team that's sort of more likely to make mistakes, but also sort of going to increase the possessions. If the Saints get ahead today, you're not going to get through the back door if you're Atlanta.
All right, Ian, coming to us from Columbus, Ohio. And this game, there's more pain for me in it than just the Falcons. And that's because Alvin Kamara, our guy, has disappeared. He has -2 receiving yards over the past 2 weeks. It's been really painful to watch. The Taysom Hill thing has been a really interesting dynamic. Most would have figured that Alvin Kamara was going to be more involved. This is going to be an opportunity for him to solidify being the best back in fantasy football this year. That has not happened. So how are you treating Taysom Hill and Alvin Kamara today?
Yeah, Taysom Hill is great for Taysom Hill. He's just not all that great for pretty much anyone else involved in this offense at the moment.
Very
so Kamara,
selfish.
I'm not freaking out too much. I'm not freaking out too much. He's my RB9 on the week. I agree with you guys. Sean Payton, still one of the brightest offensive minds. He's not going to let Taysom completely take away from Kamara too many more weeks going forward, but clearly it's not good. Clearly we need to get off of Kamara as a legit top 3 option at the position, like he's pretty much been for the better part of the last 2 or 3 seasons. So with Kamara, we just got to remember, it's not only that his targets are going down. Unfortunately, Taysom Hill is now just evolving into one of the biggest vultures in the entire league inside the 10-yard line. Already 4 rushing touchdowns over the past 2 weeks inside the 10. Latavius Murray also has more carries than Kamara inside the 10-yard line. The fantasy-friendly floor is just gone. He still has touchdown upside. I mean, he is their number one weapon, I think, more weeks than not, as we'll see. But with Taysom under center, we obviously need to drop our floor and ceiling alike, like we would with any quarterback change, really around the league. So I'm still starting Kamara, over Zeke, over David Montgomery, and these guys, but realize it is far less of a sure thing than it was, this time a month ago.
I think we're underestimating how good Drew Brees was at throwing passes at the line of scrimmage. maybe that's something that we should have given him more credit for.
He's like a small Big Ben in that sense, isn't he?
I mean, he was really good at throwing checkdowns with Alvin Kamara, and Alvin Kamara made them look very good. Where do you have Taysom ranked this week? He's a QB1? Yes?
Oh, yeah, no, he deserves it. Like I said, I mean, the Taysom Hill business is booming. For Taysom specifically, it's just everyone else where we kind of run into problems. He's my QB8. I'm starting him ahead of Lamar Jackson, Ryan Tannehill, Big Ben. We got here, but look, he's going to run the ball in as much as he pretty much can inside the 10-yard line. To your guys' point, clearly this isn't a defensive problem that we need to really be worrying about too much. So Taysom, I mean, he hasn't been playing terribly. I think, a lot of people came in thinking that he wouldn't be able to move the ball. They're still winning in their offense. If you just look at EPA per play, they're actually, they're only a couple points worse. They're better with Brees because it's just a huge difference in their passing ability. But Taysom Hill has really helped that run game. So as long as they keep looking like one of the best defenses in the league and Taysom spearheads that rushing attack, Saints will play winning football. It's just not great for Alvin Kamara and Michael Thomas fantasy football owners.
Yeah, I'm worried I'll be crying again this afternoon. To make up for it, however, I'm going all in on Taysom Hill, over 1.5 passing touchdowns, plus 200, plus 160, whatever it is. The nice thing about the props tool on PFF.com is that you can change the odds depending on what your book offers you, so you can see whether there's still an advantage at the price you have. I have a spoiler alert. You'll see an advantage because most of those prices are plus money.
Does the prop king shove the kingdom into the middle of the table? Is that going to be next week's?
The kingdom will be feasting if Taysom Hill gets over 1.5 passing touchdowns. I mean, pop pass. They're going to want to get Kamara involved.
This little jet sweep thing. I mean, look, the possibilities are endless, right? Tebow threw touchdowns in the NFL.
Sean Payton is going to want to make that one come through. So we'll get you some. Cyber40, by the way, promo code gets you 40% off any PFF subscription, which includes PFF Elite, so you could use the props tool. All right. A game that everyone says is the game of the week. I'm going to push back on that, okay? Because I think there's a game that we'll talk about a little later, which is far and away more important and a better game. But Browns-Titans, the Titans now only a 4-point favorite. This line has moved rather significantly. It was 5.5 earlier in the week, down to 5 last night, now 4 in favor of the Titans. Hosting the Browns, everyone talks about how much both these teams want to run the ball, to the point where it's made me sick. Here's the real question that we need to ask ourselves. Both teams run the ball great. The quarterbacks. Is there a 4-point difference between Ryan Tannehill in that passing game and Baker Mayfield in the Cleveland Browns passing game?
I don't know, and I think this game will maybe try and answer that question. Baker Mayfield, I think, is a big kind of unknown quantity this season, right? Overall, he's playing worse than he did a season ago. He's gone in the wrong direction while everything else around him is headed in the right direction. So now we're talking about, do they even pick up his fifth-year option? Are the team about on the precipice of moving on from Baker Mayfield? But you can start to see some green shoots of development in his season once you get past those two ugly games of Baltimore and Pittsburgh, right? The defenses absolutely murdered him and this offense overall. After that, Baker Mayfield hasn't played that badly, and since week 7, he's a top 5 graded quarterback. Now, okay, there's some pretty favorable defenses in that stretch, but you can start to see a little bit of Baker Mayfield, moving beyond his first read in a way he hasn't done that much. This, I think, is a big game because it's a halfway viable team that he has to do the same thing against.
It's a halfway viable team because the other half of the Titans is a disaster, right? So you look, Jadeveon Clowney went on IR this week, season-ending injury. They weren't getting a pass rush even with him. Mm-hmm. We talked about a month ago when they went to Cincinnati to play the Bengals, when the Bengals were starting me at left tackle, and Burrow had
played well.
I did, and Burrow had success. The thing with Baker this year, and we talked about it at length, is his under pressure statistics have been bad. Mm. But the funny thing is, last month, since Odell got hurt against the Bengals, they've been playing in terrible weather, which is hard to rush the passer in, and they played a terrible Jacksonville defense. Like, they haven't even given him enough pressured passes for that to regress. And I don't think the Titans are going to either. And when he's clean, he's fine. And I think their defense, while not good, is enough of a speed bump to deal with the explosiveness that the Titans have that the Cleveland Browns don't have without Odell at wide receiver. So I think even though people are steaming this game, it's like 4.5 now, it's still value, I think, for Cleveland at that number.
Yeah, it's not, 4 is a key number, right? But you're not losing too much sleep over that 1.5 point move. I liked it a lot more, obviously, at 5.5. I would still lean Cleveland here. The difference between the two passing games is pretty stark. Ryan Tannehill in that Tennessee Titans passing game is the best in terms of EPA per play on early down passing. The problem is they don't do it.
Right.
And you made a really good point to me the other week when I was trying to convince myself that the Titans would start throwing the ball. You're like, you can't coach them into throwing the ball. You can't. So in a game where both teams are just going to run the heck out of the ball, I actually like the Cleveland Browns running game way more. They have a better run blocking unit. That is the undersold part of it. Their run blocking, their offensive line has been amazing. And they have 2 great running backs. So there you go.
Yeah, not only that, but with the total at 53, I know Sam likes the under, but think about Cleveland on the money line here is similarly to what we had against Dallas, and Pittsburgh didn't work out. But that in a high scoring game, the points are less meaningful. So if you like Cleveland, go ahead, take them to win straight up.
All right, Ian, another running back that has been the bane of my existence, Kareem Hunt. I just don't know every week what to do with Kareem Hunt. Him and Nick Chubb, people can't stop talking about Nick Chubb. They love Nick Chubb. Where are you ranking both these guys this week?
Chubb has kind of started to grow away from Hunt in this backfield. We've seen him more weeks than not, flirting with that 23 kind of touch mark. Kareem Hunt's a little bit closer to the 12-15 range. But Chubb, we know we're starting him. He's my RB5 on the week. Only guys ahead of him, James Robinson, Austin Eckler, Dalvin Cook, Derrick Henry. Dropping Hunt a little bit, but not too far, guys. Chill out. He's still a great player, and he's had at least 10 carries in every single game. Last week didn't catch a pass, but we know that's in his skill set. And the game that's probably going to demand the Browns to keep their foot on the gas a little bit more than normal, I do think we see him get a little bit more involved in the pass game than we have in past weeks. So he's my RB15, starting Hunt ahead of, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, David Johnson, J.K. Dobbins, even Chris Carson. This is going to be a high-scoring game and a great offense. The Browns, look, say what you will about Baker Mayfield. We'll see how consistent he is here moving forward, but this run game is probably the league's single best at this point in the year. And in the passing game's defense, I know Baker had that god-awful miss to Rashard Higgins in the end zone last week. Otherwise, I thought he played pretty well in the 3 weeks before that. So much bad rainy and just, windy weather going on in Cleveland. I think it was hard to get too much of a read about them. So we're pretty much seeing, the Minnesota Vikings Kubiak offense, AFC version in Cleveland. And to Baker's credit, he's been doing well when he's had, enough time and in an easy enough matchup. So Titans don't think they have the defense to really force the Browns out of anything they want to do. Fire up all these guys with confidence.
The Rashard Higgins, he slowed down. That was his fault.
Stop it.
I had to get that one in there. I have been starting Baker Mayfield in one of my 2 quarterback leagues because Joe Burrow went down, and so that was a painful miss for me. Let's talk about these 2 quarterbacks real quick, Tannehill and Baker. Is either of them viable in in a 1 quarterback league, or are you only looking at them as back end 2 quarterback guys?
I think Tannehill is absolutely, and to your guys' point, I'm not sure if we can get the Titans to start passing the ball more, but this might be one of those matchups where he can make the most out of 24, 25 pass attempts if it is that low. AJ Brown and Corey Davis, guys. I know we're always talking about AJB every week, but other than that one dud that Corey Davis had against the Bears, he's been pretty great week in and week out. So Browns defense, I know they're getting Myles Garrett back, but I'm just not sure they can hang with these receivers when Tannehill is on top of his game. So I score on 1. I like the over in this as well, and I think the Browns are going to be able to keep things close. So yeah, man, go the well with Ryan Tannehill. He's my QB10 on the week, starting him ahead of Ben Roethlisberger, Kirk Cousins, and these guys. He's earned it. Better part of the last 2 years, he's been a top 10 quarterback in both real life and fantasy. Time to treat him like it.
There are a lot of props in this game that I like. There was one that I was looking for, which you kind of hinted at, that I did not find, and that is the Browns have a decision to make on whether they are going to pick up Baker Mayfield's option. I want to know if they don't, will he still film progressive commercials at the Brown Stadium? I'm very curious how awkward that would be. He claims that it's where he lives. There might be a commercial follow-up where it's like, I'm sorry, you no longer live here. We can't let you in. However,
Trade up to a new stadium.
Yeah, maybe. This week, Baker Mayfield, over 1.5 passing touchdowns. We just talked about it with Taysom Hill. This is a nice plus price. You can find it at plus 130 or even better. Everyone's talking about the run game. You know what that means? The play action pass is set up, baby. Love nothing more than that. Hunter Bryant, over 11.5 receiving yards. He is a tight end. That offense loves the tight end. And then I have to tell you about a rushing prop for a quarterback. Ryan Tannehill, over 11.5 rushing yards. I love it. Go to pff.com, get yourself an elite subscription. You can check them all out. That's where I find them. It's not like I'm making these up in my head as I go along. I'm using something that's much smarter than I am. All right, those were two good games. We move on now to a not so good game. The Cincinnati Bengals, they're going to Miami. The Miami Dolphins are a 10-point favorite. You would have never expected to hear those words come out of my mouth, but here we are. My question really when I came to this game was, are any Cincinnati Bengals players coming back to Cincinnati after going to South Beach? Because it's like 36 outside. That being said, can Brandon Allen cover a game against a Dolphins team whose defense seems to be capable of putting teams away?
It is scary. I mean, this is such a big number that you kind of have to go with the Bengals, but you're going to hate every single second of it. It must be like what you guys deal with betting on Atlanta every single week. This is how I feel about this game. It is a huge number, and the Dolphins defense has done a really good job of slowing down opposing passing attacks. Everyone looks at Xavier Howard with the 7 interceptions, but he's also got 3 games in which he's allowed 0 yards, like nothing, complete legitimate shutdown, which doesn't happen in today's NFL anymore. And that might be a bit as important as the interceptions, but it's just a huge number for a team.
Who do you think Howard covers?
I don't think they'll move him. I think they'll keep him, play sides and just give him whoever lines up opposite him.
Because I kind of like T. Higgins under 4 receptions, thinking about those outside corners being really strong.
Yeah, it's a plus price. I was able to get 4.5 at plus price. I think that's a good number. The player that's
Indiana.
The player that's going to make the money today for the Bengals, if anybody does, is Tyler Boyd, because Noah Igbenogany in the slot has been not very good. I mean, he's been like a replacement player as a rookie, which again doesn't mean he's going to suck forever, but he's a first-round pick that has struggled. And, in this game, I think it mirrors last week, right, where the Dolphins kind of score in that 17 to 20-point range, and it's whether or not Brandon Allen can pick up a touchdown like he did at the end of the game against the Giants, which will determine whether or not the Bengals cover. I'm a little worried about that, although I thought Allen looked way more representable than Ryan Finley would. He was very skittish in the pocket. They still continue to play A.J. Green, who gets less separation
than Jeffrey at this point.
Than Mike Renner does against the coronavirus.
At this point.
It's just I can't. He's awful, and they continue to play him.
How much mutual respect is there though between he and the defensive back?
There's got to be a lot, but I don't know. I have nothing else. I wanted to set up.
At this point, Green is like actively harming that offense compared to any other receiver
awful.
they can put out there.
There was a play in the game against the Giants where Allen put it on him a little bit behind, and he drops it. It's like when you're playing your third string quarterback, you have to make catches like that. You have to get open. And some of these receivers, we're looking at Terry McLaurin in Washington. He's doing everything to make it easier on Alex Smith. A.J. Green made it difficult on a really good rookie quarterback. If they continue to play him, they'll have a hard time scoring.
There's a quarterback named Allen with a rushing prop of 12.5. I'm taking the over. Let's close this one out with Ian. Ian, give me anyone that is of concern in this game from a fantasy perspective.
It's literally only Myles Gaskin now. I want nothing to do with this Bengals offense. I think without Burrow, the Bengals might be the single worst team in the league. Like, give me the Jets over the Bengals. It shouldn't be that big of a take because they were the worst team in the league without Burrow in 2019. But really, I thought it was that bad. The only reason that Giants game was close was because of a bunch of special teams plays. So credit the coaching staff for those. Don't see that happening again. If Fitzpatrick was out there, I could feel good about Parker and Gesicki, but we just don't see them lean on the passing game when Tua is under center. So Gaskin's back. Breida in freaking Washington and their other freaking running back. They're all, it's going to be the Gaskin show. I know normally we can be somewhat concerned about, a 3-down back coming back, getting that same full-time role. But, Ahmed's the other one. When you take away the other top 3 running backs, like who else are you going to give the ball to? Fire up Gaskin as a legit top 15 running back this week.
You mentioned Salvan Ahmed, and I can't believe you forgot his name. We were introduced to him a whole whopping 2 weeks ago out of the blue, the clear blue sky. By the way, it depends on where you go to place bets. You may be able to find some Tua props. Depending on where his rushing prop is, maybe less than 10. Could be interesting. Just saying. All right, we have made it through 3 games. We're about 70 minutes from kickoff. We're going to do the stacks that you need to play. And these were put together by a guy that won $60K last night playing DFS. So you may want to stick around. I'm just saying.
We're going to take a quick break from the fellas to bring you our top candidates for Offensive Player of the Year. The guy who might be number one on this list were it not for injuries, Davante Adams, averaging over 100 yards per game this season through 9 games he's played, averaging 2.96 yards per route, the highest of any receiver in the NFL, and he's the highest graded wide receiver in the NFL. Next up, we have tight end Travis Kelce, 978 yards receiving already at the tight end position. That's 400 more than any other tight end in the NFL. It's like he's playing a different game altogether than pretty much every single tight end, not named maybe George Kittle. 7 touchdowns this year, 9 broken tackles, and only 1 drop. And while we hate running backs here at PFF, it's tough to go anywhere else other than Derrick Henry at this point of the Tennessee Titans. 938 yards after contact this season. That's 160 more than anyone else in the NFL. He leads the NFL in rushing yards. He's averaging 3.7 yards after contact per attempt, and he has 12 scores on the season. Yes, no quarterbacks on this list. They get the MVP award. We're going with the position players, and those are our favorites.
I have to give a special shout out to one of our friends, Ben Brown.
He had a good day yesterday.
Ben Brown is an absolute machine. If you don't have a PFF subscription and you do not read Ben Brown's content, you're missing out. The guy lives, eats, sleeps, breathes props and DFS. And yesterday, he won $60K, winning a tournament by like a mile, an absolute mile. It was 25 points clear of anybody else. And every week, we pull out 3 of the stacks from his Tournament Stacks article, where he's looking to find stacks where the players might be highly owned, but the stacks themselves might not be. So if you don't have a PFF subscription, Cyber 40, it's still good through Monday. We're going to start with the game we just talked about, Titans and Browns. The stack we're looking at is Baker, Jarvis, and Derrick Henry. And the first thing that sticks out to me is the Browns with Baker Mayfield, they do love to run the ball. It means the play action game has already been established.
Yeah, this might be a game that a lot of people are fading because they're sort of trying to be contrarian. The total's high, so you might want to gravitate towards it, but maybe some people are like, well, I think the total's too high, so I'm going to go away. Obviously, if this game turns out the way that some of us think it will, which is over, this is going to be, sort of the play to have. Landry has been Mayfield's best receiver. He was great last week. There's not much in the way of coverage for the Titans on the back end, and there's not much in the way of pressure for the Titans up front. And obviously, Henry's one of those where if he goes off and rushes for 200 yards and you don't have him, you're not winning any money that week, right? So that's really, I think, the logic going in there.
You cannot find a team that has a better number one option at receiver that loves to run the ball more than the Tennessee Titans. They love it. Second stack, Aaron Rodgers, Davante Adams, and everyone's favorite running back, I say that jokingly, Miles Sanders of the Philadelphia Eagles. What do you like about this one?
Well, I mean, this is like the only interesting thing in this entire game. This game is going to suck. The pack. Sorry to break the preview beforehand. But the Eagles can't cover anybody. Obviously, Adams is sort of a cheat code there. Hopefully, Carson Wentz progresses a little bit to sort of keep this game close, so they continue to have to go to Adams. But really, the closest of the game has never really influenced how much Adams has gotten targeted anyway. So that's that is a pretty good stack to have. And obviously, Sanders is somebody, despite his utter lack of anything above average, they continue to give him the football over maybe some other more explosive or just cheaper options. So yeah, he's somebody who's going to get touches, and obviously volume is a huge key in fantasy football.
Last one is Russell Wilson and DK Metcalf, the monster combo there in Seattle against the Giants, who don't seem to have any interest in actually being that competitive, even though they have a chance to win the NFC East. And then Evan Ingram. Now, Colt McCoy probably going to play in this game, so maybe there's a complete fade of the New York Giants. But Evan Ingram figures to be a guy who, if they're going to have to throw the ball, will get a fair number of targets. Well,
and that's how you have to look at this game from the perspective of the DFS player that's trying to win a tournament. That's everybody's going to be away from this game because of Colt McCoy. If this game's closer than people believe, which the Seattle Seahawks never play games where they separate on the other team, there's going to have to be throwing by Colt McCoy, and Evan Ingram has been open a lot, and he's somebody who has, I think, high leverage drops, but drops are something that's relatively unstable. So if he gets a couple plays here, the linebackers for Seattle are good. Again, this is a big time contrarian play on the Ingram side. Obviously Metcalf, might be matched up against James Bradbury. That'll be a really good matchup. Again, I think something that a lot of the public will be fading might be something you want to go into.
You can go read, that's not the only set of stacks that we've got. Go to pff.com. You can read Ben's whole article. I think there's probably 6 or 7 stacks in there. Pick your favorite one, and hopefully you're the one winning a lot of money on this Sunday. We'll be right back. We're going to hit Colts and Texans, see whether these guys think Deshaun Watson can figure it out losing another number 1 wide receiver. PFF live pregame show from Week 13. We'll be right back. While you're waiting, I'm going to help you figure out your start-sit decisions by using the PFF.com fantasy consensus rankings. That's the consensus among all 4 of our rankers. Of course, go to PFF.com, use promo code CYBER40, get 40% off any subscription. That includes the PFF Edge subscription, which gets you all of the fantasy rankings, plus strength of schedule, plus projections, the whole deal, and you get to read every piece of PFF content. So here we go. We are going to go through quarterbacks 10 through 30. At number 10, Taysom Hill against Atlanta, in Atlanta, followed by Ben Roethlisberger on Monday night against Washington. Then Jared Goff, Matt Ryan, Cam Newton, Derek Carr, and then at 16, Phillip Rivers. Number 17 is Baker Mayfield, who sadly I am going to be starting in my 2 quarterback leagues going forward after Joe Burrow got injured. At 18 is Mitch Trubisky, 19 Matthew Stafford, 20 is Carson Wentz, Nick Mullins, Andy Dalton, Mike Glennon, Sam Darnold, and at number 25 is Drew Lock, Alex Smith, Brandon Allen, Ryan Fitzpatrick, Colt McCoy round out the final set of quarterbacks. Of course, Robert Griffin III, he's not playing anymore. Who knows if Trace McSorley will play. Lamar Jackson, if he plays, probably a top 10 play once again. Go to PFF.com, get a PFF Edge subscription for 40% off with CYBER40 as your promo code. And now back to the PFF Week 13 live pregame show. Find me something that the prop giant loves more than talking about how Kirk Cousins is a double-digit favorite is a bad move. And that's why we start with Jags-Vikings. Vikings a 10-point favorite, total at 51. Mike the Neck Glennon is starting at quarterback for the Jaguars. And so this begs the question, would you stick your neck out to back Squirt Cousins as a double-digit favorite?
No, come on. This has the same characteristics as Vikings Cowboys had a couple weeks ago. James Robinson, DJ Chark. Like this offense for the Jaguars is not void of talent, and I think that they score enough points here to keep it close. There's also always the likelihood of a Kirk Cousins meltdown, and I don't mean like full on meltdown. I mean like 2 fumble returns for a touchdown meltdown or interception meltdown for all that kind of stuff. I think that keeps the Jaguars close here. I think that's really the only side.
Yeah, I mean, at some point we should probably stop trusting the Vikings this much. I'm not quite sure why Vegas isn't learning the lessons of the past few weeks. This Vikings team is still not that good. The offense has talent. They can put up some points, but that defense is bad on both ends, pass rush and coverage. And Mike Glennon played okay last week. He had a PFF grade of 73. He is a functional NFL quarterback against a defense that is yet to prove to be functional.
Mike Glennon's done nothing wrong in the NFL other than come in before Jameis. Everybody's going to get overshot. Like Glennon played okay as a rookie and as a sophomore in 2014, got replaced by Jameis, and then got Chicago'd. Much like Nick Foles got Chicago'd, much like Mitch Trubisky.
Much like the Bears fans have been Chicago.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's like Glennon.
Shout out Robert Mays.
How much worse is Glennon than Gardner Minshew?
Not much.
Yeah. Okay, well, if Gardner Minshew was starting this game, you'd bet Jacksonville, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, no, I think it's ridiculous. The Minnesota Vikings can't cover anybody. You could put us three out there, and I'd take our overs for receiving against that secondary. Don't put that on social media, please. But 10 points is ridiculous.
Yeah.
For like an actual NFL team, Doug Marrone is clearly trying to put together an offensive performance, a total performance that shows that he could be a coach, whether it's with the Jags or with someone else. And all these players, Mike Glennon included, are playing to continue to be a viable backup somewhere else.
Well, and they're playing hard. They've lost a bunch. They've lost 2 27-25 games this year. They lost to the Packers by 4 on the road just a couple weeks ago. They're a team that's being competitive, which is always the question about sort of this lame duck Marrone session.
All right, the one guy we haven't talked about who might be Ian's favorite out of nowhere fantasy guy this season. I feel like that's a decent take there. James Robinson has come out of nowhere. And to surprise no one on this set, played way better than Leonard Fournette ever played in Jacksonville. Not surprising at all. Where do you have James today?
Oh, he's earned like weekly top 5 treatment at this point. He needs to be in fantasy football lines of all shapes and sizes. Look, I mean, Glennon, Luton, Minshew, whoever's been under center, Jaguars are getting Robinson at least 20 touches, and that's just led to oodles of fantasy football success, really independent of the matchup. I would just say, guys, I mean, I agree with what you're saying about, the Vikings not necessarily being world beaters on defense by any stretch, but all those things also apply to the Jaguars defense like tenfold. They're, I think, far worse than the Vikings. And credit to Kirk Cousins, career best marks in PFF passing grade, yards per attempt, average target depth. I don't know if the Jaguars can slow down the Vikings at all in this one. So I think there actually are some good game stack opportunities. If you want to go with Cousins, Jefferson, Thielen, maybe think it won't be a Dalvin Cook game, wrap it back around with the James Robinson or DJ Chark, who is now active this week. I think there could be points flying on both sides of the ball. So, yeah, 10 points might be a little high for the Vikings. I understand that. But just realize there are no good defenses on either sideline in this one. I think we can see both offenses have their way here.
Where do you have Cousins this week?
Cousins is my QB 12. Volume's an issue, but, like we talked about with Tannehill, for a guy that we got to worry about, is he even going to hit 30 pass attempts? If we are going to go down that street, we should do it in a matchup where he can make the most of those opportunities. And you look at Jacksonville, 32nd yards per attempt allowed, and they're 30th in pressure rate, 30th in QB rating. Like Eric was saying, this is, like the Vikings are a bad defense, or maybe it was Sam. Whoever is saying that it's a bad pass rush, bad secondary, exact same thing with the Jaguars.
Music to my ears, because one of my favorite props this week. Kirk Cousins, another passing touchdown prop where you get a very nice plus price. He's plus 145 to get to throw more than 2.5 passing touchdowns. I'll restart. He's plus 145 to throw over 2.5 touchdowns. And that sets up nicely. Why? Because as Ian just alluded to, the Jaguars can't play defense. And he's got 2 really, really good receivers now with Adam Thielen back. Justin Jefferson proved that he is an absolute machine. And don't sleep on Chad Beebe, who I also like, for over 1.5 receptions, which is also plus 145. And then I have to throw another quarterback rushing prop. Mike Glennon's rushing prop you can find at 4.5 rushing yards. He falls down forward, and that's 4.5 yards.
Just on the neck.
Just like it's basic science. So go make that happen. We move on now to Colts and Texans. The poor Texans and Deshaun Watson lose DeAndre Hopkins, get absolutely nothing in return, and now they think, okay, well, Will Fuller's going to have to step in. He's probably going to get injured, boo-hoo. He actually sustains health for the majority of the season. He's been awesome. Deshaun Watson is playing as well as anybody.
We won't question why.
Yeah. You buried the lead there. And now Deshaun Watson is without Will Fuller again because of a PED thing. So can Deshaun Watson overcome losing another number 1 wide receiver? They're a 3-point underdog at home to the Indianapolis Colts.
Yeah, that's really where the uncertainty is for me and why I'm passing on this game. The other reason is that, as much as the Titans are going to be in a letdown spot, I think the Colts have to be in sort of a tighten-up spot in this game, right? Because if they lose, their playoff probability goes beneath 40% in the tough AFC. They have losses to Cleveland. They have losses. I mean, they have tiebreakers that aren't particularly good in the AFC. If they win, it's up over 70%. So this is a huge leverage game for Indianapolis. They're very well coached. And I think Houston, Watson's obviously amazing, right? But missing a number 1 receiver, missing another number 1 receiver, missing another number 1 receiver. I think the problem is they're going to have a tough time scoring enough to keep this thing to win the game outright, I would say.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you. This game just scares me for what Deshaun Watson is going to look like. He hasn't had the letdown game this season that have been there every other season of his career. And I think generally he has become a better fundamental passer without Nuke Hopkins there, when he's actually had to find the open guy. Will Fuller has traditionally made a huge difference to this offense when he's there or when he's not there. I don't know if that still holds true the way Deshaun Watson is now playing, now that he's had to kind of adjust his game without a Nuke Hopkins. Is that still the case? And just for that unknown, I don't want any part of betting on it.
Great point about Watson, in the sense that the separator between him and Mahomes during their first 3 or 4 seasons
was the bad games.
Mahomes doesn't have bad games.
Right.
Watson has these games, like last year they lost to Carolina like 16-10, or he's had the game
that
where he had
Ravens
like
game,
the punctured lung or whatever.
He had like 3 games with a PFF grade in the 30s.
Right,
and Mahomes doesn't come anywhere near
if
them.
he doesn't have those in his repertoire anymore, the head coach of Houston has the easiest freaking job in the history of the league.
Right.
But
also has David Johnson, so congratulations. I mean, that's why I'm actually going to the over here. I refuse to believe that Deshaun Watson will be taken down by Will Fuller going out. I just refuse to believe that. And I also think your point about the Colts, they are going to come into this game and say, look, we are going to have to score some points here. Okay, we cannot let Deshaun Watson beat us. And if we don't score enough points, Deshaun Watson is liable to score a couple of touchdowns just on his own, brilliance. And so 50.5, I'll take the over. And this brings us to, Ian, the question that I have, which is, what the hell am I going to do without Will Fuller? Does Brandon Cooks step in and immediately become a wide receiver 1? Is there someone that we're not thinking about who gets an opportunity here? How are you playing this one?
Yeah, I think we got more options because you guys point to Deshaun Watson continues to play really better than ever, even despite not having Hopkins. And he's had really severe Will Fuller splits throughout his career. But look at Brandon Cooks. He's played with Tom Brady, Drew Brees, Jared Goff, and now Deshaun Watson. All those quarterbacks have averaged more yards per attempt in their career with Brandon Cooks on the field as opposed to without. So I think as long as you have at least one really speedy guy out there that can help, clear up those intermediate areas, Watson's going to be putting up numbers. And I think that means guys like Kiki Kuti, who is now the number 2 projected pass game option in this offense, he's a viable wide receiver 3. And even Jordan Akins can come through and make a lot of plays. Watson's number 5 in dropbacks, so at least 2 tight ends on the field over the past 2 years. So I think we're going to see plenty of Akins and Fells. Good, not great Colts defense. I think we've seen some of the better offenses in the league move the ball against them. Expecting plenty of points here in Watson to keep on keeping on. I guess my question is, could we actually see some of these Colts wide receivers like Michael Pittman, maybe T.Y. Hilton, wore a clown mask one game against this very secondary? People forget he did that once upon a time. Because my issue, with Pittman over these past few weeks, the guy's big and strong with the ball in his hands, but I feel like all of his big plays have almost come from these uncovered crossers, almost just blown coverage when he's picking up yards. Now we got a Texans defense that is already, very familiar with blowing coverage. Now you take away Bradley Roby, the other guy that just got suspended. I don't think they could be able to slow down Rivers all that well. As Sam mentioned last week, I think, Rivers, he kind of shot puts the ball around. We don't exactly see it. It's not the most, aesthetically pleasing way to pick up passing yards. He's been very efficient all year. You look at explosive pass play rate and stuff like that. Colts can move the ball through the air. I think they'll have their way, and this is the week to take a chance on Pittman and those type of guys and hope that they can get those softer coverage looks.
A guy that you didn't mention, a guy that we love to fade, Jonathan Taylor, under 53.5 rushing yards. I like that one. I just think they throw the ball here. Nyheim Hines, best running back that the Colts have. Raiders, Jets in New York. Sam Darnold is back. The Jets, a 7.5 point underdog, total of 47. It's very cold, 40 degrees, winds about 10 miles per hour. Should be no rain here. I feel like we've gotten to the point of the season, week 13. Everyone thinks, the Jets are really, really bad, and this is when Sam Darnold and Adam Gase put together their best work, scare themselves potentially out of the first pick in the NFL draft. Is this Sam Darnold's time to shine?
If you're asking me if I like the Jets, yes. I don't think any of the other stuff is true. I just think that the Jets are the pick here. The Raiders had their meltdown, understandably, last week. It was literally the exact same situation that they had against the Jets last year when they went to Atlanta. Atlanta, messed around for the entire game and still beat them by 30. I just don't think the Raiders are that good to be laying that many points on the road, even against the worst team in the league.
I think that's probably true. On the other hand, I think they're going to want to come out there and prove that they're not as bad as they looked last week, and this will actually be something like the Raiders' best game. And with the Jets, I'm actually learning the lesson from last week, which is that Sam Darnold just isn't good, right? He's broken, he's bad right now, regardless of the fact that the trio of receivers that are there with him are actually pretty useful and can put up points. So I'm done with Sam Darnold until he gets a chance to sit down behind somebody else next year as the reclamation project. And let's just say that they put up some points, just not enough to cover anything.
Aren't the Raiders the perfect opportunity to
they are.
resuscitate they have no Jonathan Abram. I don't know if, he's a guy that takes a lot of chances, so maybe not having him in there.
That's a nice way of knowing that he absolutely has no awareness at all on the football field. But yeah, takes a lot of chances.
Josh Jacobs also not playing, and I wonder, to your point, if that means that the Raiders say, okay, we're going to throw the ball over the yard, and that's actually good for them. They have receivers that Darren Waller very good, Henry Ruggs, Nelson Aguilar come out of nowhere. Derek Carr has been very good this season, so could be an opportunity for them to put up points. I like the call of the over there. I have a feeling that's where our friend Ian Hartitz is going to go. Ian, looking at no Josh Jacobs here, obviously a lot of people who were relying on him, where does that put Booker, his backup? Is he going to be an RB1, or do you think they go throw the ball a ton and the running back position less emphasized in this offense?
I don't have quite the same confidence that I would in Jacobs, but Booker's still my RB15 on the week, RB14. I have him ahead of Kareem Hunt, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, even David Johnson, Chris Carson, guys that I'm not quite sure are going to be getting those 15 carries and 3 to 5 targets that we should see Booker get. Last year when Jacobs missed time, we saw DeAndre Washington walk right into that feature back role, even with Jalen Richard active and healthy. They just look at that, number 2A back, which is Booker this year and was Washington last year, as the true handcuff to Jacobs. So fire up Booker with confidence. And really this whole Raiders offense, Aguilar, Waller, Carr, it's a perfect bounce back spot in terms of defense they're facing. Yes, they were absolutely atrocious last week. There's no, way of, making that better. But Carr, still our 7th highest graded passer on the year, 12th in yards per attempt. They had scored 30 points in 3 straight games prior to that complete dud against the Falcons. So I think it's a nice bounce back spot, sneaky kind of tournament DFS potential if they do throw the ball more, like you were saying. And I think you can even go back to the Jets side, Brashad Perryman, Denzel Mims. The one concern I have with these talented outside wide receivers was Darnold come back. We've seen him just check down to Jamison Crowder, to his and Gase's heart's desire, over the past 2 seasons. Darnold had the single highest average target depth in a single game of his career last week with Mims and Perryman out there on the field. So might not be pretty. We're going to get 6 to 8, pretty volatile deep shot targets in an offense that doesn't hit many of them. But I think, that Raider stack, again, with one of Perryman or Mims, give me Perryman gun to my head, could potentially be a nice way to be a little contrarian in tournaments.
Every week I try and pick one prop that measures the size of your balls. And this week, it's Sam Darnold, no interceptions. It's plus money. It's plus 140, plus 150, depending on where you go. How much do you want to just sit there and ride the lightning? If you're willing to do it, just say it. It's there for you. Prop Giant agrees. We will be right back. We're going to talk about the quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, and tight ends that Ian Hartitz is going to start and the ones that he is going to sit this week. We're about 47 minutes from kick. Stay with us.
Mike Renner here. Another quick break. Going to go to the defensive side of the ball now. Our defensive player of the year rankings at this point. On to number 3, it's Xavier Howard of the Miami Dolphins. 7 picks, 8 pass breakups. He has been all around the ball this season, and 7 picks is hard in a defense that plays as much man coverage as the Miami Dolphins do. He has some of the best ball skills of any cornerback in the NFL, and as it stands right now, the highest graded cornerback in the NFL. So there you have it, our top 3 defensive player of the year rankings as it stands right now. Number 2, TJ Watt, Pittsburgh Steelers, having a fantastic season. His 33 combined sacks and hits this year are 7 more than anyone else. He has been getting to the QB at a high rate this season. Good against the run, good as a pass rusher. He is top 3 graded in both of those categories, so hard to argue with him if he does get the award. At number 1, this one's obvious. He is the every single year defensive player of the year, and it's Aaron Donald, the most dominant player in all of football right now. Leads the NFL with 66 pressures, and it is far, far more difficult to get pressure on the interior than it is on the edge. So 66 pressures, leads by 6. Pretty crazy stat there. 93.2 overall grade, leads all defensive players. He, the obvious choice at this point. If you're going anywhere else, you're kind of just being contrarian. You're kind of getting voter fatigue if you're going to choose anyone else.
the players that you need to start and the ones that you should let ride the pine this week. Ian Hartitz is going to start us off with quarterbacks. I really have no argument here because whenever I see Mitchell Trubisky, the next word that comes to mind is the bench.
He's actually, like, surprisingly a world beater when he plays the Lions, or at least has been during his career. But, yeah, it's just too, like, we can't play a quarterback that has a very good chance, you know, maybe not very good, but at least a decent chance of being benched following, like, even one horrendous first-half turnover. So just one of these situations where when the bench chance is that high, can't go the well with Mitch Trubisky. Go with Cam Newton. This Chargers defense has allowed at least 27 points in every single game since week 3. I mean, this team is just allergic to, you know, playing in anything other than a shootout. And Cam, you know, it's been a little bit up and down as a passer. I get that. We still have, you know, one of the higher rushing floors in the league thanks to, you know, all the chances he gets inside the 5-yard line. And the passing game has been more good than bad in recent weeks. So Cam, you know, he's someone I'm comfortable ranking as a legit QB1.
Looking at the running backs here, Raheem the Dream Mostert, he was back. He looked good. The running game for the San Francisco 49ers is undefeated. Kyle Shanahan reportedly more time to watch tape now that he's siloed in a hotel room in Arizona, which means only one thing. The holes that Raheem Mostert is going to be able to run through are going to be massive.
Oh, and he looked fantastic last week. He didn't bust off like any big runs, but even his 6-yard runs, man, you're just like, wow, it's a good thing they got a hand on him because that dude is fast enough to take it the distance. I think he actually has next-gen stats, 2 fastest single play marks of the entire season already, even though he's missed all this time. So, yeah, I fully expect him to get back to busting those big plays. You know, it's a situation where I know we have to wait to watch him. He's not going to be on the main slate, but Raheem Mostert, he's my RB7 on the week. I only have Aaron Jones, Nick Chubb, James Robinson, Eckler, Henry, and Cook ahead of him. So really expecting big things from Mostert. I am going to be sitting Giovanni Bernard, basically everybody involved with this Bengals offense. I mean, just realize if you didn't get a chance to watch that Bengals and Giants game last week, good for you because you missed an atrocious game. But, you know, kick return touchdown from the Bengals, punt return out to the 50, you know, to make things close. Only time they scored was late in the game when the Giants went into obvious prevent. This offense cannot move the ball. And even though Giovanni Bernard is getting a lot of touches, I just think that we're still seeing Samaje Perine a little bit too much involved. And again, if you can help it, just do not pick the Bengal whenever starts to question you have.
Yeah, anything that makes you have to watch that game is a bad decision, so just don't do it. Take us to the pass catchers, the ones you like and the ones you don't.
Yeah, I think Marvin Jones is someone that we got to give actually the upside wide receiver 3 respect that he's earned. I mean, bunch of targets on Thanksgiving, even though he didn't come through. And it looks like he had back-to-back duds because the week before that he only had 55 yards. But 50-yard flea flicker touchdown was unfortunately nullified on illegal formation. So you just look at him without Kenny Golladay over the past 2 years. The guy scores touchdowns. I know he's not the same talent he used to be, but there's just really no one else to throw the ball to in Detroit. So maybe we get, you know, that post-Patricia, Darrell Bevell now running the show. The offense, you know, has a little more pep in their step type of storyline going on. I do think Marvin Jones is you know, a sneaky top 24 option at the position that most people are overlooking. On the other side of things, CeeDee Lamb, great talent, great rookie. We can't trust anyone on this Cowboys offense. The offensive line was already a massive issue. Now we take away Zach Martin from the equation. The only 4 quarters this post-Dak offense has looked even remotely good was against a Vikings team that couldn't pressure them or guard anybody. So I'm not, you know, similar to the Bengals, you know, unless we're talking to Ezekiel Elliott or Amari Cooper, stay the hell away from this Cowboys offense. At tight end, I'm going back to well with Dallas Goedert. I know Zach Ertz likely to be active, but probably going to be limited. And either way, we've seen them really give both these guys full-time roles. I think Goddard is someone that, as a top 6 option at his position, we can keep going back to the well with him, you know, really until we see Ertz step up, you know, and give us anything more than he was earlier in the year, because that guy was truly playing some awful football before the injury. I am sitting Trey Burton, having getting him in a lot of start-sit questions. Just realized with the Colts, Mo Alley-Cox plays more than Trey Burton. Jack Doyle's usually out there for the goal line reps. It's nice when Burton gets a touchdown. Rivers loves throwing to his tight ends, but we cannot feel confident at all about 3 tight end committees, people. Just too many pass catchers in Indy to feel confident about any one tight end.
There's some spots where a 3 tight end committee might be up your alley on the football field or in your fantasy lineup. It's not going to be one of them. We are heading towards 40 minutes to kick. We're going to talk about the best game of the week, which is Rams and Cardinals, coming up next. The PFF live pregame show is going to be right back. While we're waiting for them to figure their lives out, we are going to go through the PFF consensus rankings for wide receivers. Again, use promo code CYBER40, get 40% off a PFF Edge subscription. That gets you all of the PFF fantasy rankings, including the individual rankers ranks, plus strength of schedule, projections, wide receiver cornerback matchup, all the content on PFF.com. But If you haven't got one already, I'm going to help you out here. At number 15, Cooper Kupp, followed by Brandon Cooks, Devontae Parker, Robert Woods, Julio Jones, and then Deontay Johnson at 20. Julio better play a full game, man. I need him to. 21 is Amari Cooper, followed by Deebo Samuel, Jarvis Landry, Chase Claypool, Marvin Jones Jr. at 25. No Kenny Golladay for Detroit. 26 is Juju, Jacoby Myers, Corey Davis, CeeDee Lamb, and Sterling Shepard at 30. Cole Beasley in the slot for Buffalo is at 31, followed by Tyler Boyd, Michael Pittman, Jerry Jeudy, Denzel Mims at 35, Christian Kirk 36, Mike Williams, T. Higgins, Marquise Hollywood Brown, and at number 40 is T.Y. Hilton. Go to PFF.com, use promo code CYBER40, get 40% off any PFF subscription. That includes PFF Edge, which gets you all of the fantasy content and tools that you could possibly want. And now, back to the PFF Week 13 live pregame show. We were talking during the break about great shots of giants and small people, King Henry, Dion Lewis. The next iteration, the prop giant Eric Eager and Sam Monson. We need to maybe bring you closer to the camera, really exaggerate that a little bit. But you're an athlete. That's really
athletes adjust.
Exactly. The best game of the entire Sunday slate. People are talking about Browns and Titans as if that's the best one. I don't understand why. It's Rams-Cardinals. Two teams competing for a playoff or a division spot in a game with a ton of leverage, especially for the Cardinals. If they lose this game, they go under 50% to make the playoffs. If they win it, they're 80% to make the playoffs. The Rams, embarrassed by Kyle Shanahan's wizardry last week. Kyler Murray, a little banged up. The Cardinals now 2.5-point underdogs at home, total 48.5. There are a lot of interesting matchups in this game. I could pinpoint like 5 of them. Which one is the one that decides this game?
I mean, it's obviously Ramsey versus Hopkins, right? Like that defense, like they've done such a great job of building a defense in a way that we wouldn't, right? Like superstars and guys who are sort of like lowly regarded. Those lowly regarded guys have made extremely good plays this year, and it's reduced a lot of their games down to how good Jalen Ramsey can be and how good Aaron Donald can be up front. And so to me, that's the matchup. And it's tough because this is such a big game. The team that loses this game really has no chance of winning the NFC West. And if the Arizona Cardinals lose this game, they dip beneath 50% to make the playoffs. And that's kind of where I look. The Cardinals would be a below 500 team right now if they didn't complete the Hail Mary at the end of the Buffalo game at home. They blew a lead in that game, and they're kind of a weaker team right now. They're really going to need to improve in order for this to be sort of anything near like a playoff contender.
It's interesting. It shows the value of a superstar player, a cornerback, where you can essentially maximize the value of guys that just aren't that good if they have to face a DK Metcalf or a Nuke Hopkins. You keep them away from those, and a Troy Hill and a Darius Williams are suddenly really high-end plus players for you. The thing that's interesting to me in this game is the schematic matchup, right? You've got a Rams defense that plays a ton of split safeties, 2 high safeties, really likes messing with your coverages, really likes messing with your passing game overall, but you have Kyler Murray, who is a cheat code because he changes the number count. He messes with where you normally allocate players because you have to worry about him at any given moment taking off and making plays on the ground with his legs. How that happens, how that chess match pans out in this game, I think is really interesting the first time we've seen it.
So Kyler Murray had 10 or more rushing attempts in 5 straight games, then gets injured,
right,
and has 5 rushing attempts each of the last 2 games. So my question is, how confident can you be that he is going to be feeling good enough or just say, screw it, I'm going all in? The fact that this game is so important leads me to think maybe we see that from him. I would look at a matchup that we have not yet talked about. Obviously, you brought up the number 1 matchup, but Aaron Donald against the interior offensive line of Arizona.
Who like to play wide splits.
And Kyler Murray maybe not being 100%. That to me would be something that would really worry me. And then on the flip side, the Rams offense. Sean McVay, after last week, everyone's talking about Kyle Shanahan. Wait for Sean McVay to dial up plenty of stuff, Cooper Kupp to get loose here in this game. I will take the Rams as a short road favorite. I'd also just look looking at the Rams defense, if you took 2 defensive players to start a team with, these might be 1 and 2 that you select.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it
Right?
absolutely is. One is the best, probably the best player not named Patrick Mahomes in all of football, and the other one is basically makes every single player on the rest of the defense 30% better.
Like Jalen Ramsey could play every single position.
Yeah.
Well, and that's really where the benefit has come from, because late in his career in Jacksonville and then last season for the Rams, they were playing him at outside corner basically predominantly, and I think really wasting. It's sort of like, what the Houston Texans have done with J.J. Watt, which is just play him in one spot, and it's like, oh, that's not that you don't even leverage his true versatility and abilities there.
He's also one of only a couple of players that are even capable of physically matching up with a guy like Metcalf or Hopkins. Like most cornerbacks immediately just physically overwhelmed. Ramsey can actually go toe-to-toe with those guys and match up with them.
Yeah, very rare. I think Marlon Humphrey's maybe the other one in the NFL, but they're the inside-outside guys that are quick but also can match up with the physical guys are just unheard of.
They played a bunch when he was in Jacksonville, obviously Hopkins in Houston, about an 85 passer rating when targeting Hopkins, and Ramsey was in his coverage, which is well below league average, in case you guys are wondering out there. A bunch of fantasy questions here. Ian, let's start with the receivers in Los Angeles, because it was Bob Woods' season, and then Cooper Kupp has just been a target monster of late. Looking at the way that the Cardinals might deploy a guy like Patrick Peterson, how are you ranking these 2 guys this week?
I think he's going to be on Bobby Trees, and I think that's great because I think the only time we've seen Peterson really look good over the past 2 years is when he's been on DK Metcalf, and Russell Wilson just has not really targeted him. I don't even think Peterson deserves all that much credit for quote-unquote shutting down Metcalf. There weren't any targets for him to really shut down, so even though we were getting the empty box scores, really any shadow matchup we've seen with Peterson ever since he's come back from the PED suspension, we've seen guys, particularly more shiftier type receivers like Robert Woods, have a bunch of success. So Woods, Cooper Kupp, both guys top 15 wide receivers this week. The only concern with them throughout this year was more so in the first month and a half when we just weren't seeing them throw the ball all that much. I think this, being an important game and just seeing what we've seen from this offense over the past few weeks, a little more confidence in Jared Goff, potentially going for 35, 40, if not more pass attempts. Much more of an issue on the other side of the ball with Kyler Murray's rushing attempts, to your point. But what that means is that Kenyon Drake actually has been getting more targets and more goal line carries over the past few weeks. It's been an up and down season for Drake. Somehow, he is a PPR RB14 through 12 weeks of action. He might just find his way into the top 12 before the season's over.
You're not sitting Kyler Murray. He's still well within your top 10, though, right?
Oh, yeah, but he's my QB7, and I didn't think it'd be a situation, similar to Alvin Kamara. I didn't think I'd ever be taking Kyler out of that QB1 spot because his rushing is just such a freaking fancy cheat code. But like Alvin Kamara, you take away, his, Thor's hammer or whatever it is, it's not going to work out quite as well as it was. So Kyler, he can still put up big numbers through the air, but it's a tough matchup. And with that rushing issue, I got Justin Herbert, Josh Allen, Deshaun Watson. I got those guys ahead of him. I'm still starting Kyler, over your Taysom Hills, Lamar Jacksons, Ryan Tannehills of the world. But we got to take at least a little bit of a step back because, again, the rushing and the matchup.
You know how I could have told you that was going to happen is I own Kyler Murray and Alvin Kamara in all my fantasy leagues. So you should just look at what I have, a la Melvin Gordon in that one draft we did randomly during the offseason, and fade those guys. I liked 2 points that you made there, and that is leading me to a couple of props that I really like here. We'll talk about Bob Woods first. Patrick Peterson potentially being the guy that is covering him for the majority of this game. Under 5.5 receptions plus 105. I love that one. I think Cooper Kupp is the guy that Jared Goff goes to when he needs a boost and where Sean McVay looks to scheme up attack points against this Cardinals defense. And then Kenyon Drake, potentially with a little bit of a banged up shoulder, with Aaron Donald terrorizing the interior of that Cardinals offensive line. Over 10.5 receiving yards for Kenyon Drake, a little screen, a little dump off, and it's only minus 100, so go get yourself some. And if you want to see all the props, Cyber40 promo code, still good through Monday, 40% off any PFF subscription. All right, Patriots-Chargers, this one in Los Angeles. The Chargers, now a favorite. It was a pick'em. People get kind of worked up about when a line crosses 0. You shouldn't. It's not that big of a deal. But it is interesting to see the Chargers versus the Patriots in a game with such a short spread. Because what that says is, are you really going to take the Los Angeles Chargers of Anaheim to win a football game against Bill Belichick? Yeah,
and I think in this particular case, at -1, I don't know. Like, if you grade out the players, the Chargers are how many points better? What are they like? They're laying 4.5, 5 here at least.
Yeah. If Bill Belichick is coaching the Chargers, they're a 10-point favorite.
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, well, they're also in first place in the AFC West, possibly. But the problem is, I think, when you look at this game, Cam Newton's played a lot better than the numbers suggest. He has more interceptions than touchdowns. Like they played like crap last week on offense, but he's always got the potential with Jacoby Myers, with Damiere Byrd to actually move the football, and the Chargers have been relatively easy to move the football on. Herbert has amazing numbers when under pressure. You know that Belichick is going to bank on those numbers regressing.
A lot of cover zero.
A lot of cover zero. But at the same time, I think that's going to induce points, and that's why I like the over in this one.
Well, the other thing is, normally you would just say in a vacuum, Bill Belichick against a young quarterback is a nightmare matchup for that young quarterback. We've already seen this matchup. New England South in Miami absolutely wrecked Justin Herbert. 51 PFF grade, the lowest of his career so far. Like, there's a game plan to beat this guy with this defense already in place and already demonstrably functional so far this season. So, one, do the Patriots just replicate that and do exactly the same thing and lead to Herbert having a nightmare? Or two, have the Chargers been able to look at that tape, figure out why they weren't able to get anything done against Miami, and make some adjustments?
The Chargers figuring something out. No, absolutely not. I thought that, that's a great point. When I was looking at this, actually, when we looked at that matchup, I think we talked about it, and we mentioned how what the Dolphins do is exactly what Bill Belichick does to destroy young quarterbacks, right? And they do it better than anyone else. The Dolphins cover zero has been the most prevalent in terms of usage and the best in terms of the results they've gotten. The Patriots have taken a little bit of a step back there because their front four, it's a disaster.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see if they can actually get there. The Chargers also have weapons on the outside to take advantage, if they can create any separation. Ian, there are a couple of questions here, especially because Justin Herbert, Cam Newton was the guy that we expected to be firmly in the top, 5, 6, 7 quarterbacks at this point. Justin Herbert is now a guy that is continuously in that segment of the quarterback rankings. But as we just talked about, it's Bill Belichick. How confident are you, and where do you have him this week?
I still have him as my QB6, ahead of even Kyler Murray and Lamar Jackson and some of these guys with the higher rushing floor. Even though Herbert, we've seen him bottom out a little bit in terms of some, real-life performances. In fantasy, he still really even hasn't had that much of a floor game. He's gone for over 300 passing yards and or accounted for 3 total touchdowns in every single game this season. So right now, only 2017 Deshaun Watson, among all rookie QBs ever, has averaged more fantasy points per game than what Justin Herbert is doing in 2020. So it was a fun, Herbert versus Burrow kind of race we had going on. But throughout that all, Herbert was the one putting up bigger numbers. I agree, it's not a great matchup, but this has been a Patriots defense that, we've seen them give up the long ball at a bottom 5 rate in the entire league. So having Gilmore back in action, we've seen them, I think, play a little bit better overall defense here in the past few weeks. But I don't know, man, every single one of these Chargers games seems to shoot out. And I just wonder, I do think, with Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, now Austin Eckler back in the fold, even if the Patriots are able to get up, have their way with Herbert for a little bit, I think he's got enough in him to, come back and put some production in garbage time if it comes to that.
Yeah, let it be known that it says I like the over. I like New England and the over. Everyone making some sound points.
The last week's game going under for the first time in a long time for the Chargers, plus the way that the Patriots looked, is why this total is under 50. Take advantage of that.
And there was some flukiness to the nth degree with what the Chargers did. It was like...
Well, it's not fluky when the same coach makes the same decisions over and over and over again.
The results continuously being that horrific, though. Yeah. The New England backfield is interesting because it's like all over the place. There are probably some people out there with Damian Harris who are wondering, he looks like he's the best runner. Does he have a shot? Where are you ranking him? How are you figuring out that New England backfield?
I put them right next to each other. Damon Harris at RB23 and James White at RB24. They're both so kind of dependent on the game script that it's hard to, have too much confidence in either guy. But whichever one does end up breaking out is probably going to actually end up flirting with more, top 15 production. Kind of like that Tampa Bay backfield we saw a couple weeks ago with Fournette and Rojo almost switching places. It's not a 50-50 split. It's going to be 75-25. We just don't really know what direction. Either way, at least we only have 2 running backs to deal with now. Sony Michel was not involved last week even with Rex Burkhead out of the picture. So for the first time in what seems like almost 2 decades, we actually have a well-defined Patriots backfield. Now that I say that, I'm sure they'll add someone else to the mix and muddle it up for this week. But tentatively, we can treat both Harris and James White as low-end RB2s because they should be, focal points in a matchup that we're expecting the Patriots to put up points. So I would say Harris, just projecting the Patriots to try to get up and play, or to get up and play with a lead. I would lean towards Harris, but don't sleep on James White. I mean, he only had 1 target last week. We were repping him on this show because the potential for targets. He ended up still getting value thanks to 2 goal line rushing scores. Don't think that's going to happen again. But either way, that is the type of lucky plays, quote unquote lucky plays that can happen when we only have a 2 running back committee to choose from.
Yeah, Belichick will find some D3 lacrosse player who's going to play 15 running back snaps for him at some point this season. A couple of props that I like here. Justin Herbert over 11.5 rushing yards. We talked about the cover 0. He's a mobile guy. I think he probably gets confused a couple of times. Scampers out there, if they were smart, they'd use him in the design running game a little bit more, but can't do anything about that. I'm not the coach. Cam Newton over 1.5 passing touchdowns is plus 145. I'm all about the plus money on the passing touchdowns this week. Points are what you want to root for. 196.5 passing yards, I believe, is about minus 105 for Newton as well. As Eric said, he's been playing way better than the box score stats would tell you. All right, we're going to move quickly through Eagles, Packers in large part because the Packers are probably going to move quickly through the Philadelphia Eagles, and for good reason. Carson Wentz, an absolute atrocity. I can't understand how Jalen Hurts is not getting some playing time here. I'm just going to start this one off and say I like Aaron Rodgers over 2.5 passing touchdowns. It's plus 145. I can't understand how that's plus money. It's the Aaron Rodgers revenge tour. They know that he's in a competition for the MVP. If you don't know this, go check what Matt LaFleur is talking about. Okay? So he is getting over 2.5 passing touchdowns in this game, no matter what it takes. And then Carson Wentz will probably throw 2 to the Packers and 2 to his own team in an attempt to come back. So I like him as well, over 1.5 at plus 140.
Just a couple weeks removed from being less than a field goal-ish underdog to an 8-3 Browns team on the road. The Eagles, who were the most overrated team in the league, are now properly rated as double-digit.
You can't be overrated when you're so bad that no one ever thinks about you.
But that was the point. In the NFC East, every discussion was, if the Eagles can't get it together, well, hey, the Eagles suck, so they're not going to get it together. And I think in this one, they're properly rated, which is why I'm going to lay off this game. I think the Packers have been a team at home that has struggled to cover the number because the weather situation has always been an issue.
You can say it, they're soft.
And they are soft. So I think they win today despite their pillowness.
Yeah, it's gone from everybody assuming that the Eagles would eventually get their stuff together over the course of the season and walk off.
And that assumption was why they're overrated, in my opinion.
Would walk off at the front of the NFC East. It's not happening. They're probably not going to win the division. Somebody else is at 5 wins. The Eagles are broken on offense. Carson Wentz is a mess, and he isn't the only problem. The offensive line is still in ribbons with all the injuries. The receivers are back, but they don't know what to do with any of them.
They don't play the right guys.
Right. Now that they all have them all, they don't understand what roles each one of them should have in this offense, and the scheme isn't exactly helping anybody out either. Carson Wentz right now has the 25th PFF grade throwing to open receivers, throwing to guys that are actually wide open, and this isn't something he's ever been great at. He's always had that sort of low end of consistent play, but the high-end stuff, the volatile stuff, has come back down to earth, and how he just looks terrible.
If you put Wentz in a clean pocket and put him in the 1980s, his statistics wouldn't be good enough to make the Pro Bowl. That's bad. He's awful. And it's irreducible. When you have 20% of your plays that are negatively graded, you are not giving your team a chance to score consistently. And I think the Packers defense sucks, but I don't think it's going to matter.
If you're playing at home, I always place bets on what will be said during this here live show, and Eric saying irreducible was plus 125, and that cashed. Ian, you know who you're starting, all of your Packers. I assume most people are very skittish on the Eagles. Give us some players that are maybe on the borderline and whether you like them or you are fading them this week.
I think there's only 2 viable guys, with Zach Ertz likely coming back, but Doug Peterson saying that they got to be smart with how to use him. I'm fine going back to with Dallas Goedert as, a legit top 5 tight end for another week. I think he's better than Ertz at this point, with Ertz, playing so banged up throughout this year as it has been. And Goddard, he's been really their best consistent receiver throughout the year when he's been healthy. So even with Ertz, maybe taking some snaps away, we've seen the Eagles use plenty of 2 tight end sets in the past, and I think we've seen enough from Wentz targeting Goddard as number 1 to stay confident, even with Ertz coming back to some extent. And then Miles Sanders, he's still the lead back. We're seeing a little more Boston Scott than we'd like. Jordan Howard's now active, but this is the league's second worst defense in PPR points per game allowed to opposing RBs. So, continue to treat Sanders as an auto start, but more of an upside RB2 than the locked-in RB1 that we thought we had. Other than that, though, it's a wrap because Fulgham, Rager, these guys are now losing snaps to Jeffrey and freaking John Hightower as well. So Greg Ward's staying in the slot. We more or less have like a 5 wide receiver rotation going around in anyone's idea of an awful passing game. So it's only really, it seems like a matter of time until we see a little bit more of the Jalen Hurts experience. Fully expecting almost like a Tua type reaction with his pass catchers at that point. Much more of a run first offense that probably isn't going to be any more efficient. So, Rager, Fulgham, these guys that we were hoping were going to come alive. It's unfortunate, but I just don't think that they're viable fantasy options in this spot.
They are not. Aaron Rodgers, viable no matter what, especially against the Eagles. 2.5 passing touchdowns. This might be my favorite one. Plus 145. What are people? Ridiculous. The lack of respect for Aaron Rodgers must stop. We are 20 minutes to kick. We've got Ian Hartitz's favorite upside DFS plays, and then we're going to close it out. Stick with us. We'll be right back.
Mike Renner here, lead draft analyst, Pro Football Focus, about to break down our Coach of the Year rankings as it stands right now. Last but certainly not least, it is Brian Flores of the Miami Dolphins. This was a team everyone thought was tanking just last year, gutted the entire roster. Now they'd make the playoffs if the season ended today. They're 7-4. What he's done with that defense, the second best scoring defense in the NFL, is pretty incredible. Like I said, we talked about Xavier Howard as a Defensive Player of the Year candidate earlier. He has a lot of guys playing well above what we've seen from them in the past on the defensive side of the ball in Miami. That's indicative of good coaching. At number 2, it's the front runner in the NFC, Sean Payton, the New Orleans Saints head coach. They are 9-2, despite Drew Brees not having his arm that he's had in the past whatsoever. That downfield passing offense pretty much non-existent, but they keep winning games. He's 2-0 with Taysom Hill. And honestly, he deserves this award for trolling Roddy White on Twitter the way he did a few weeks ago after the win over Atlanta. And number 1 on this list, nowhere else you can go with it after that Wednesday win over the Ravens, it's Mike Tomlin. They are a unblemished 11-0, and as George will tell you, Pittsburgh Steelers suck. So for them to go 11-0 is pretty ridiculous considering how bad they are in George's mind. They have the top scoring defense so far this year, 23 turnovers as well, leads the NFL. Pittsburgh Steelers at 11-0, now the 1 seed in the AFC as it stands right now. Have to think he's the front runner.
Looking for somebody to drop in your DFS lineup that is going to explode, but maybe that other people aren't so high on. Projected ownership has to be less than 10%, not be one of the 5 most highly priced options at their position. Ian, I'm excited because I think you're going to tell me about a guy that I need to blow up this week.
That's your guy, Alvin Kamara. As disappointing as it's been, and we cannot treat him as, the top 3 running back that he's been really throughout his entire career. Okay, it's still Alvin Kamara. This is still a top 10, top 12 fantasy RB facing a Falcons team that he has owned. Sean Payton, one of the smartest offensive minds in the league. He's not going to let Kamara go too much longer without, being a big part of this game plan. And when you look at how this projected ownership is shaking out, Austin Eckler has 7,100, projected to be one of the highest owned players on the slate, regardless of position. I think pivoting away from Eckler to Alvin Kamara doesn't taste good. I understand you're not going to do that in cash games, your 50-50s and all that. But in tournaments, I think that's a good way to differentiate yourself from the field. Another running back I like is Myles Gaskin at 5,900. Look, he's an 11.5 point favorite at home against a Bengals team that has no business being on the field with the Dolphins. Tua under center should only lead to a more run-heavy approach. And the only reason people are off Gaskin is because we had David Montgomery and Devontae Booker a little bit cheaper, and Gaskin is first came back from injury. So you're taking a chance he doesn't immediately get that 3-down roll. But if he does, the matchup is perfect for him to go out and have himself a multi-touchdown performance. At wide receiver, DJ Chark. Again, people, we want to get away from these real chalky guys guys that everyone's using in cash. Get away from them in tournaments. And by going with DJ Chark at 5,400, we don't have to worry about Brandon Cooks and his, potential 20% plus ownership. Chark is coming back from the ribs injury. And as we've been talking about Mike Glennon on this entire show, he does not suck. And DJ Chark is his undisputed number one wide receiver against a Vikings defense that I just don't think can guard him. So love Chark in this bounce back. And then finally, Nelson Aguilar, 5,200. Busted last week. He's a boom or bust wide receiver. These types of things happen. So Aguilar facing a Jets defense that, just seems to care about one thing and one thing only, that is stopping the run. I expect Derek Carr, Darren Waller, and Aguilar to have nice bounce back weeks. And again, at 5,200, I just think that, the way a lot of the pricing is working out this week, we're seeing stars and scrubs. Don't ignore that middle salary area. I think Chark and Aguilar, in addition to Gaskin and Kamara, can give you some nice upside in tournaments.
I'll do anything for Alvin Kamara to have a great rest of the season. I'd cut off a couple of fingers. Not even a question. We'll be back. We've got 3 more games to discuss. Ian, thank you. The PFF Live pregame show for Week 13 will be right back. In the meantime, going to help you figure out which running backs to start this week. You don't want to mess this one up because there's only a couple weeks left before the playoffs get going. I'm going to go through running backs 10 through 30. Go to PFF.com and use Cyber40 as your promo code and get 40% off any PFF subscription. That includes PFF Edge, which gets you all of the fantasy rankings. That includes all of the individual rankers ranks, strength of schedule, projections, wide receiver cornerback matchup, and all of PFF's content. So here we go. Running backs. At number 10, Chris Carson, followed by Alvin Kamara. What has happened to him? I hope he turns it around. DeAndre Swift, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Raheem the Dream Mostert, Ezekiel Elliott at 15. Don't know where Tony Pollard is, but he needs to be playing more. Kareem Hunt at 16. Kenyon Drake, J.K. Dobbins, Jonathan Taylor. At number 20 is Wayne Gallman with maybe Colt McCoy at quarterback in Seattle. Melvin Gordon III, Giovanni Bernard, Devontae Booker, Naeem Hines, James White, Damian Harris, Duke Johnson Jr., Frank Gore, the ageless wonder at 28, Latavius Murray, Zach Moss is at 30. Go to PFF.com, use promo code CYBER40 and get yourself 40% off any PFF subscription. And now back to the PFF pregame show of Week 13. We're 13 minutes from Week 13 kicking off, and that means we're going to get through Lions and Bears as quickly as we possibly can, because the Lions managed to get rid of their head coach last week. Everyone was very excited about that. Maybe the Bears try that same thing. This week, they are still a 3-point favorite with Mitch Trubisky, total of 44.5. I'll just say this. The Lions feeling rejuvenated by the fact that Patricia is no longer there as an underdog. I know no Kenny Golladay, but I'll still take the Lions.
Yeah, you and everybody else this week. They open at 6, 5, 4. It's like a countdown to the segment. And now it's at 3. I kind of like the Bears, actually, at this point. No Kenny Golladay. When we saw that, the numbers moved a little bit. And I think no wide receiver means more to his offense than Golladay does to the Lions.
I think that's a fair point. I'm curious to see how much the defense can do in the gap between firing, the problem and where they are now. Like, all they did was run cover 1, right? And then early this season, it's like, well, we need to change it up. It's getting just torched by opposing teams. So they mix in some really soft cover 2 and 3. And it's like, well, teams still know what you're doing. This didn't help. So now can they actually have a relatively creative defense, something that's going to help their players, not hinder it? And we get a chance to see what that does against Mitchell Trubisky. And if it's anything in terms of helpful, Trubisky's going to sink.
It's the better quarterback decisively here is getting points, like in a season where home field is basically meaningless. Ian, Marvin Jones, TJ Hawkinson with no Kenny Golladay, where do you have them ranked this week against a pretty good Bears coverage unit?
Yeah, Marvin Jones is my wide receiver 24. We've just seen consistently with Kenny Golladay sideline as he is again. Even if the Lions passing game as a whole isn't quite as good, they do feature Marvin Jones as that legit number 1 wide receiver. Now we even taken Marvin Hall out of the picture. I think we could get used to seeing Marvin actually becoming that field stretching threat as well. Whether or not he still has that in his repertoire is a conversation for another day. But the Lions are treating him as a number 1 wide receiver. So at least in fantasy, we can treat him as a number 2 or number 3. And then Hawkinson, he's earned top 5 weekly treatment at the tight end position. It's a mess best as a whole behind Travis Kelce. So even a locked-in top 5 tight end will give you some duds. But again, with Galladay out of the picture, even if Stafford isn't quite the same world beater under center, we see so much his passing game go through Jones and Hawkinson. Treat Hawkinson as a top 5 tight end, Jones as a top 30 wide receiver at worst.
It is Colt McCoy for the New York Football Giants as they go to Seattle to play the Seahawks. The Seahawks, a 10.5-point favorite at home. Colt McCoy did not look very good here in Cincinnati. I'm not sure what gives us any confidence that he will look good at all in Seattle. The Seahawks, we talked about this earlier this week. Are they the team best positioned to potentially beat the Chiefs if they can make it to the Super Bowl?
I think so. I mean, both of the Chiefs are just a stronger version of the Seahawks. Both defenses are bad, can look okay against bad teams, much like Seattle has over the past few weeks. And both teams have really good weapons and a quarterback, who is at the top of his game. Now, Mahomes a little bit better than Russell Wilson, but Russell Wilson's best game can beat anybody. So I agree with you. I think that the issue is they're a couple games back, right? They need to sort of get that 1 seed, because I think them playing on the road is a really tough proposition against anybody but Carson Wentz in the playoffs like last year. And so they have a climb here, but their schedule isn't that tough going down the stretch.
No. Starts today with the Giants.
Yeah, poor old James Bradbury is going to start having Pavlovian flashbacks to his time in the NFC South. Like, freed from the disaster of Julio Jones, Mike Evans, all those receivers there. He's having the best PFF grade of his career, the lowest passer rating allowed. Yeah. He's playing fantastically. He's given up a longest catch of 28 yards. Now he has to play DK Metcalf, another freakish monster wide receiver that pretty much any cornerback just has no chance of covering. Good luck keeping that run going this week.
Yeah, I don't even know what to say about the Giants. The only thing I have to say is that I think the Seahawks could score 47 points on their own, and they might try to, because they need to make sure that there's no chance they lose this game. Ian, looking from a fantasy perspective, I'm assuming that with Colt McCoy, at least in redraft, there's no one on the New York Giants side that you're going with. Is there anyone that maybe has your eye from a DFS perspective?
Wayne Gallman is about the only guy you can talk yourself into, because Devontae Freeman is not returning. He's now been placed on the COVID list. So Wayne Gallman, volume-based 20-carry back, I guess. But, man, I just think this Giants offense could struggle to move the ball at all. Jason Garrett, unironically, called a QB sweep for Colt McCoy on, a 2nd and 10 in normal game script. I just, they're not going to adjust this offense to their players' strengths. They really haven't all season long, and I think they're just going to get outdone by a Seahawks defense that should be able to be exploited. We've seen teams throwing them all year. I just don't trust the Clapper to really put his players in a position to succeed with the Giants. So, yeah, on the Seahawks side of the ball, though, I do wonder, because last week we saw, Darius Slay on DK Metcalf. That's a tough matchup, but they were just giving Slay zero safety help at all throughout the entire game. I do wonder if we see Bradbury matching Metcalf, but also getting help. And because of that, maybe, just maybe, Tyler Lockett week. It's been a while, but we know that when Russ decides to lock onto one of these guys, they're going to go off. It was Metcalf last week. It's been a while since, we've seen Tyler Lockett, but I know in many of my tournament lineups, I'm going with that Russ and Lockett stack, hoping that, Russ kind of does his thing, where sometimes, the only time we see Metcalf contained is when it's been Ramsey or Pearson, one of these big-bodied corners on him that just makes Russ look the other way. Bradbury, I think, fits that bill.
Colt McCoy still being a quarterback in the NFL has nothing to do with the fact that he was a guy that came out of Texas and, that people like for that reason. Nothing to do with that.
He's a gamer.
Yeah, he's definitely deserved.
He was the second-string quarterback for 3 different starters in Washington.
I don't know how you watch this guy play and go yeah, he definitely deserves to be the guy we turn to if our starter goes down. I don't understand it. Anyways, what I do understand is that Russell Wilson, he's really good at playing football. And the Giants, James Bradbury's good, but overall, they're not very good. 2.5 passing touchdowns is plus 145. Russell Wilson gets this in by quarter 3. They also go over. Last game of the Sunday slate, it's Broncos Chiefs in Kansas City. It's going to be pretty cold, 5% chance of rain, 37 degrees, light winds. Drew Lock returning to his hometown or home country, whatever you want to call it. I can't imagine that anyone has any faith in Drew Lock, even as a massive underdog here. It's 13.5, 51.5 is the total. There are not enough points that exist out there for me to take Drew Lock over Patrick Mahomes. I just really struggle with that. And every game really matters here for the Chiefs. The Pittsburgh Steelers looked vulnerable against Robert Griffin III. So the Chiefs just have to say, look, we just got to keep trucking along here. the Steelers could slip up, and so for that reason, they put the hammer down and run over.
Yeah, since covering about 20 points against the Jets at home on the 1st of November, the Chiefs are 0-3 against the spread. I don't think that plays into their mind, but they probably are sort of sick and tired
of losing you money. Yeah.
Of grinding out these games, and hence I'm going to go with Kansas City minus the 13.5. I think it's Drew Lock's terrible, and the Denver Broncos are going to try as they might. Chiefs have to get right on defense. This is going to be their game where they're like, the Chiefs emerge as, what's wrong with the Chiefs defense? Oh, they got it all together this week. No, it's just Drew Lock.
Remember, it's not about defense. It's about how good or bad the offense is. And Drew Lock is throwing more uncatchable passes than any other quarterback on the planet right now.
That, I think, is critical, right? It's a scary number. It's big. And Denver's defense actually isn't bad. Like, they've been able to do some pretty good things.
Bryce Callahan injured, though. I mean, that's a big deal.
Right, against some decent teams. On the other hand, they just don't have a quarterback, even when they have 4 of them to choose from, as opposed to none, like last week. Drew Lock currently has the 33rd rated PFF grade in the NFL. There's only 32 starting quarterbacks in the NFL. So that isn't good, and Drew Lock just isn't good enough to cover any kind of number. I agree with you.
Do you think we get a Kendall Hinton sighting? Or God. All right, real quick, I want to poll the group. You can bring Ian in here, too. I'm kind of curious here. Who's more important to the Chiefs' offense, Kelsey or Hill?
I think it's Kelsey.
Yeah, I agree.
Oh, baby. Okay, I'll go Tyreek Hill for fun because he takes the top off, and you know how much a fan of that I am. Ian?
Yeah, I got Tyreek. I think, maybe not the best wide receiver in the league, but maybe the most impactful just with what defenses have to, look for every single play. And the fact the Chiefs, it seems like, they use more pre-snap motion than just about anybody. Trying to deal with Hill, flashing across that formation just amongst everything else you got to worry about. I think it's Tyreek just because of pure speed.
Flashing, also something George is a huge fan of.
Yeah, I was going to say, taking the top off and flashing, it's the things that Tyreek Hill gets done. It's such an interesting question here. From a fantasy perspective, Clyde Edwards-Helaire is questionable. You've mentioned a lot of guys that you're playing over him this week. Who are you playing Clyde Edwards-Helaire over, if anyone?
It does sound like he's going to be active. He can be a low-end RB2. He's not that, top 5, top 6 guy we were hoping to get, but he remains the number 1 running back for the best offense in the league. And because of that, guys that have similar, touch concerns, David Johnson, first game back from concussion, Chris Carson is a mini committee in Seattle, even J.K. Dobbins, someone that looked like he broke out, but then the COVID thing. I'm starting Clyde over all those guys.
Ian, next week, I think it's next week, hopefully we'll have you here with us, but we appreciate you hanging out. We appreciate all of you at home hanging out with us. I've got one last prop for all you beautiful people out there. I just talked about Tyreek Hill, 5.5 receptions. I have a feeling the Denver Broncos watched him absolutely destroy the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I have a feeling they roll a little more coverage his way. Under 5.5, he can still light them up, but it's plus 125. Go to PFF.com, use promo code CYBER40 for 40% off. Enjoy Week 13. Stay healthy. Peace out.